the first thing that I'm going to do is take some masking tape and tape down each corner of the paper to make sure it doesn't move about when I'm drawing on it. Next, I'm going to take a steel ruler and I'm going to line the ruler up to the edge of the paper to help me to make my grid. So I'm just lining it right up to the edge, and I'm going to use the width of the ruler to create my rows and columns from there. So here I would recommend using a light pencil, a H pencil, a 2H pencil, something like that. Don't use the B pencils. Here I'm just using a mechanical pencil because I want you to be able to see what it is that I'm drawing. So I'm lining this up, I'm moving the ruler down, lining it up to my previous line, and to create the next one, again just using the width of the ruler, making sure that the ruler is lined up perfectly straight to the line that I've created. If you don't take care at this point, you're going to get angled lines that are not straight, and if you get that, you're not going to get a grid, and it's very important that you get a perfect grid here. So it's really important that you pay attention to the details. So here I've got exactly the amount of rows that I need. Now I'm doing the columns. For me, I'm going to do this in the middle. You could start from the left edge and work your way across. I'm lining up the ruler, the top part of the ruler, to the top of the page. I'm also using the inches and centimeters to make sure that those markings are parallel to the horizontal lines. Now I'm creating my vertical lines and doing the exact same thing as I did before, just lining the ruler up to those lines, using the width of the ruler to create the next line, and making absolutely sure it's straight. So I've got the right amount of grids I need, height and width. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to refer to the photograph, and where I see a shape, a line, an outline of the subject, I'm going to start putting that into each corresponding box in my grid. So here I'm just focusing on this particular grid. I'm not looking at the overall person, only that shape that's in each square. And what I'm looking at too is where it crosses into the next square below or beside. Is it at the halfway point? Is it more to the right of that, more to the left of that, higher, lower? You're looking at the edge of the square to help you to understand where to put it. Here I'm focusing on the angle. This is really important. When you're creating these lines, practice the angle. Make sure that it's exactly as you see it in the photograph in that square, and then draw it out. So again, this section here is closer to the left of the square. It's not central, it's somewhere in between, maybe a quarter, maybe a third in some spaces. And I'm just trying to map it out, the outline. Here I'm working on the ear, looking at the angles. And again, I'm not looking at it so much as an ear at this point. I'm looking at each square, and I'm just looking at the angle and the shape and where those lines intersect the grid box that I'm working on. When you do this, you start to develop the whole drawing in a section by section process, but you will start to map it out exactly as it is in the photograph. And this is one really comfortable way to get, I suppose, a more realistic outline for you to develop on top of that. So using the grid technique is really important. When you're creating your grid, it's also very important to make sure that the lines are soft and light, because you're going to want to get rid of them later on. So you want to see them, but they want to be light enough for you to be able to erase later. Now here I've made mine dark because it's important that you see what I'm drawing in relation to the grid on my paper to what you see in the grid on the photograph. So as you can see, I'm just working my way around the image. So I'm just trying to capture the jaw and the beard area, the chin, the left side of the face. And again, looking at the lines, where did they connect at the bottom of the square? Where did they connect at the top? How far to the left or right of center is the line? Recording the angles, making sure that I'm recording what I see in each square in the photograph, doing the same thing into the paper. sometimes what I would recommend doing for areas like the eyes, nose or mouth, which are really the key facial features for you to be able to accurately depict a person. If your grid is a little bit too big, you could always divide that grid in half, vertically and horizontally. So instead of having one big square, you'd have 4 small squares. And you can do the same on your photograph. And that can help you just to make sure you have the finer details correct. And then for the rest, the outline, you can just continue to use the normal grid squares. So again, I'm really focused on the angle. It's very important that I'm trying to forget about what I'm drawing, not consider that I'm drawing a mouth, but really to look at the angles I see in the photograph. It really just comes down to line, shape, and the angles of those lines, and where everything intersects in the squares of your grid. So here what I'm doing is starting to map out the different tonal areas that I see in the posterized photograph. So the great thing about posterized is it separates out the tones in a photograph, and you can basically map out the general areas where you will see certain grays, where you will see white, where you'll see black. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment, is just again using the grid to map out those gray areas that I see, especially across the side of the face, under the eyes, under the nose, and around the neck as well. And then I'm going to develop those afterwards. So again, make sure that you're using a light pencil for this, and make sure that you map out those areas in a way that you can develop the image and you're not going to see those outlines anymore later. So just make sure you're not pushing too hard on the pencil too. These are guides for you to develop. And then once you've got that done, you're just going to erase the grid, both within the picture of the subject and also the background, and then start building up the tones as you see them from light to dark.